Welcome to the DCR's T32 Spotlight Series, where we highlight many of the training programs available at MGH and MGB. Today, we welcome Dr. Jessica Haberer, Director of Global Health Research at the Mass General Research Institute. We will discuss who will be discussing the new T32 Fellowship in Global Non-Communicable Diseases. All right, it's all yours.
Great. Well, thanks so much for the opportunity to present this new fellowship. So it's brand new. We haven't had any fellows yet. So I appreciate your interest, and I will go ahead and share my screen. And I will be presenting for about 15 minutes, just to give you an idea about the fellowship. And then I would love to hear any questions that you have or any discussion around global NCDs and global health research in general. All right, so let's get started. So I think for those of you who are listening to this talk now or the recording, you're probably aware that non-communicable diseases are very common and more common in low and middle income countries than they are in high income countries, and are becoming a much more common focus of global health research, which traditionally has been more focused on HIV, tuberculosis, malaria, other infectious diseases. But I think we're all becoming very aware that we need to focus much more on non-communicable disease. And as you can see here, that accounts for 71% of all deaths globally, amounting to about 41 million annually. And many of these diseases are linked closely to poverty, but also as economies are growing and people are having diseases that are much more associated with lifestyle. We're seeing that in low and middle income countries very commonly. So there are a lot of critical research questions to ask in this area. And I'm going to give you some examples of areas that I think are important, but this is by no means exhaustive. So there are many distinct pathobiological, treatment response questions that need to be studied in diverse global settings. You can also think about associated modifiable environmental, social, behavioral, and structural factors that contribute to NCDs affecting morbidity and mortality. So a lot of research that needs to be done in that area. And also thinking about optimal treatment programs, implementation programs that can really help improve health and reduce disease, again, in non-communicable diseases. I think we also need to be developing mechanisms and platforms for creating capacity to support locally driven solutions to these really challenging issues. And I think that's an important area for global health in general, but non-communicable disease is no exception. And so researchers who are interested in this area need to get not only research skills, but also understand how to implement their research, how to think about administration, which can be challenging, in particular in global health, because of differences in the way research is conducted around the world, just on a practical level, how to move money, things like that, but also how to think about equitable partnerships and ways that we can do global health well. And that includes understanding the history of global health and how we can better decolonize and balance the playing field when it comes to being able to answer questions that are interesting and relevant for people globally. So this particular fellowship is focusing in on 4 very broad areas in cardiovascular disease, cardiometabolic disease, pulmonary, and also hematology. And that was kind of a practical decision because we wanted to create the broadest opportunity for people who are interested in NCDs. But the NIH only funds in certain buckets or certain silos, unfortunately. And so the broadest umbrella we could create was including those 4 areas, but that does give us a lot of opportunity to think about NCDs that are affecting people around the world. And so this is funded by NHLBI, so the National Institute of Heart, Lung, Blood. And so that, again, explains some of the focus. So just to get a little bit more granular on the types of research that we anticipate happening in this fellowship. And again, this is not exclusive, but just to give you an idea of the topics we're anticipating that may resonate with your interests. And certainly this is something we can discuss at the end if you have questions about your specific area of focus. But in cardiovascular and cardiometabolic disease, we're thinking about outcome studies to better determine leading causes of cardiovascular outcomes. And that may be in the context of intersecting chronic infectious disease like HIV, or maybe multimorbidity within NCD, thinking about diseases like diabetes, hypertension, obesity. We could consider supporting regional longitudinal cohort studies to determine leading targetable risk factors for cardiovascular outcomes. And that could be, within lifestyle or diet. But it could be quite broad, but thinking again how these factors are relevant in the global South. And a lot of the data and the recommendations that we currently use within medicine are based on, say, the Framingham study, or which was done here in Massachusetts. And there's a lot of data coming out that those conclusions really don't apply elsewhere in the world. So having these studies done specifically in the global South or other like low and middle income countries really could be quite revolutionary when it comes to treatment. So we can also look at discovery, testing and implementation evaluations for interventions to prevent cardiovascular disease, again, looking to reduce morbidity and mortality. Or we could be thinking about something in genetics and how different genetic patterns may contribute to cardiovascular disease. So flipping over to pulmonary disease, there are many areas, again, that we could consider. Some, just to start, would be environmental determinants of chronic lung disease. So thinking about biomass, that's how a lot of people cook around the world. So do cook stoves that are in indoor settings, what kind of impact is that having on chronic lung disease? Thinking about occupational exposures beyond household work. And thinking about also like post-infectious disease, which then becomes more of a non-communicable kind of presentation. How can we better support people who have that kind of disease? Looking at longitudinal cohort studies to think about causal risk factors for common pulmonary disease like asthma, COPD, interstitial lung disease, and looking at preventable risk factors specifically in the global South. We can have outcome studies that define leading causes of death and disability from overlapping disease. As I was mentioning, you may have someone who had tuberculosis and now they have COPD from those sequelae. What can we do about that? And we have to really understand where it comes from. And are there nutritional factors to consider as well? And then there are unique conditions that are going to be much more prevalent, perhaps in areas like sub-Saharan Africa, and thinking specifically about sickle cell disease and how that might influence pulmonary hypertension. And then thinking about hematology, sickle cell disease is very much of an issue in many settings around the world. So how could we improve treatment for sickle cell disease to increase hemoglobin oxygenation? To think about monitoring, there's some really cool ideas around transcranial Doppler measurements that could predict stroke in people who have sickle cell disease. So there's a lot that can be done in that area. And then other things that, anemia is incredibly common around the world. And so thinking about iron repletion and how that could be done from an implementation perspective, we certainly know how to give IV iron, but how does that actually happen in settings that don't currently do that? New models for accessing safe transfusion. Similarly, a lot of implementation research could be done there. Thinking about G6PD deficiency and malaria. Also looking at other inherited disorders of hemoglobin, which may be more common elsewhere in the globe. And I will emphasize here, though, that we are not able to support hematologic malignancies. So like, leukemia, that has to be funded separately, just based on NIH patterns and the way the different institutes fund their research training programs. But there's a lot that can still be done under the hematology umbrella. So in terms of our fellowship, who's eligible? This is a postdoctoral fellowship only, so it's not for pre-doctoral trainees, but this encompasses the MD pathway post-residency or PhD. An MGH affiliation is not required. The fellowship is based at MGH, and most of our mentors are from MGH, but we're flexible in being able to bring people into the institution if they are interested in this program. And the fellows do need to be U.S. citizens or permanent residents, again, based on NIH criteria. At the Center for Global Health, we are developing other programs that are more flexible, and we're hoping to bring people to Boston from other places in kind of like a complementary type of fellowship to this one. So there are other opportunities if you're not a citizen or a permanent resident, or you know of people who might be interested in this type of research. Please feel free to reach out afterwards. I'll give you my email. But for this specific program, you would need to be a citizen or a permanent resident, meaning having a green card. So I'll just give you a brief overview of what the training program will look like. And it starts with the program in clinical effectiveness at the Harvard Chan School, if needed. So if somebody already has a really strong background in research skills, maybe having done an MPH before, or even a PhD in statistics or epidemiology, certainly this would not be necessary, but we do pay for this 6-week training course that a lot of people really find very valuable for kickstarting their postdoc fellowship experience. And that course covers basic clinical epidemiology, basic biostatistics, and then there are a number of electives that are offered through the PCE, this program in clinical effectiveness. You can see them listed here, but basic regression, ethics around the practice of public health, some basic implementation research, decision analysis, collaborative data science. So, a lot of different options depending on what your interests are. And then you can also take during the year, we have funding for training related expenses. These again are just examples of courses that are offered at the School of Public Health in this domain. But you can see they have courses on fundamental principles in global health, thinking about specific statistics that are more likely to be useful in global health, quantitative and qualitative, survival methods. I mentioned a lot of longitudinal cohort analysis as being, an area of focus. So those kind of techniques would be really valuable for that type of research. Also looking at social and behavioral research, which is a lot of what I do. So there are many options, and there is funding to support coursework within the fellowship. Again, this is not exclusive, but just a few ideas to consider. And then we will also have other training baked into the program. So the fellowship, we're anticipating people spending a couple of years with us, but we'll have an annual curriculum that you can kind of come and go with. But ideally bringing people together once a month to talk about various issues in global health research, some being more specific about the research and some being more specific about your own career development. So just some examples of program seminars that we're planning to have. One would be on how to have good global health partnerships, which is really a core principle and value within global health research. Thinking specifically about issues of equity and decolonization. As I mentioned at the beginning, learning the history of global health, which isn't always good, and understanding how we can make it better, I think is a priority within this program, as much as learning how to do regression analysis or any other research technique that you may learn. And also, as I mentioned, we will have seminars specifically on grant administration, which is really critical for being a successful researcher. And then in line with the idea of career development, we have seminars planned on resiliency in research and learning how to make a good go of this career path, which can be challenging. And thinking about very practical things like how do you pay back your loans to make a research track more appealing and feasible, knowing that many people do come into fellowship with a lot of debt from undergrad and graduate training. We also will encourage people to participate in the Conquering the K workshop. K awards are kind of the entree into NIH funding and certainly very helpful in getting an academic research career started. And so we'll be very proactive in helping you do that through this fellowship. And the Conquering the K course is offered through the Division of Clinical Research. It's incredibly valuable. I've been participating in it for years and I can't recommend it enough. So we include that in this program and help you access that curriculum. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to try to bring together fellows from a number of different programs, either existing within the T32 world, or others that are more complementary, like in the Center for Global Health, trying to bring folks from other parts of the world here, so that there's more of a bi-directional exchange in our training opportunities. But also in some R25 and other types of educational programs. Like I run one in HIV, so it would be an infectious disease pathway, but there may be many points of like where people can come together in a community of practice so that we can learn from each other and support each other. And we have very specific goals in terms of bringing together people at different levels of training, so that you can see what's coming next down the pathway, and hearing from people who are just a few steps ahead, but also people who are further along. So there'll be a mix of fellows at different levels, as well as more senior investigators and mentors. And I won't dwell on this too much in the talk today, but our training program also does have dedicated mentor training, because we recognize that some mentors are better than others, and there are skills, involved. There is a real talent base to mentoring. And so all the mentors who are participating in our program will be offered this Mentoring the Mentor workshop that some colleagues and I run every fall. And we also support a curriculum called Mentoring Across Differences, where we meet with mentors periodically throughout the year and thinking about how we can acknowledge difference, whether that's by gender, age, race, ethnicity, et cetera, and thinking about how to recognize those differences and embracing what that may mean for a mentoring relationship, and really giving our mentors skills in having the most successful relationships with their mentees as possible. And we also provide structure so that there's an individual development plan to help you think about your short-term, medium-term, long-term goals, and make sure that you and your mentor are progressing in the way that you would like. And then providing additional support as needed. And that may mean rounding out a mentorship team by bringing in additional expertise, or working through any challenges that may arise as you work together. So to give you an idea of who is available through the fellowship, right now we have this group of mentors signed up for the program, and you can see them divided in different areas, again highlighting the core content areas of the fellowship being cardiovascular and cardiometabolic disease, global pulmonology, global hematology, and then just also being able to do global health research, because that is a skill in itself. And this is not exclusive. So these are people who are all senior researchers or mid-career. Everyone here has had at least an R01, which is the kind of goal of creating an independent research career. So everyone here has a lot of experience, and some are really quite senior. But we're all planning to work together to support our fellows. And if you come into a program like this without a mentor, we'll help you find one, starting with this group, but again, it's not exclusive. Or you may already be working with someone on this list, but just to give you a sense of who we have available already. And I'll give you our website at the end, but the bios for each of our mentors are listed on our website. And here's a typical fellowship experience for year one. And again, we're anticipating funding people for 2 years, usually after finishing any clinical responsibilities if you're coming in through the MD pathway. And this is not the way it has to be necessarily, but I wanted to give you a snapshot as to what it could look like. So we're anticipating people starting in July, running through the year with weekly meetings with their mentors. Having some meetings with mentors that are specifically for career development. So that may be woven into your weekly meetings, but we anticipate the weekly meetings will be focused much more on, day-to-day, like writing proposals, what reading should I be doing, follow up with the training and how that could influence the work you want to do in your research projects. But setting aside dedicated time at least every 6 months to think about career development and where you're headed. I also plan to meet with every fellow twice annually and as needed along those same lines. The PCE, that program in clinical effectiveness, would be at the beginning. So it's 6 weeks in July and August. And then additional coursework could happen whenever that makes sense for you. We have weekly research meetings in the Center for Global Health, where we talk about research ideas and developing different proposals and talking about analytic questions. So those happen every Friday morning. We also offer grand rounds once a month during the core academic calendar that we would anticipate our fellows attending. Those programs that I talked about, whether it's career development or research training, we offer those bi-monthly. The Conquering the K course happens towards the spring each year. It's in 5 sessions. And then we also would facilitate in participation in responsible conduct of research courses, which are required by NIH. And in that community of practice, we'll be having social events, which I think are important, and we're getting used to doing those again as we come out of the pandemic, and hopefully we'll stay out of the pandemic. And then, of course, in global health, travel is involved, and we will help you figure out how to do that. And make sure that that fits in with any clinical responsibilities you may still have, or any coursework or other things you want to do in the fellowship. So just to round things out here, the logistics for the fellowship positions are available as early as this July. I know that's off cycle. Often people need to plan pretty far in advance for fellowship, but we just got funded. And so we are open for fellows as early as July, but we'll be looking for 2 fellows per year from now moving forward. Again, we can offer about 2 years of salary. Sometimes people need less, sometimes they need more, but we anticipate providing 2 years of a PGY scale level salary with benefits. We offer to pay for the program and clinical effectiveness, and some additional funding for other training related experiences, like a couple of courses. And then we pay for travel to the research site. As I mentioned, we'll help with finding a mentor if you need that, and figuring out how to do clinical research or clinical care, knowing that you may be away for various periods. We can get creative with bunching schedules, that sort of thing. And then I'll just finish by telling you a little bit about the Center for Global Health if you're not familiar with us. We do more than just research, although that's where I'm focusing most of my time. We also have programs in nursing, global health partnerships, education, and humanitarian action. And we really work across the hospital. We're a unique center that is not within a department, but instead it works with all departments, whether that's medicine, surgery, pediatrics, et cetera. And we also help with collaboration across different institutes that are associated with MGH. So we are based at 125 Nashua Street, which is right by the Zakin Bridge and North Station. We offer a lot of services. These are included in the fellowship, but they're also available to other global health researchers across the hospital, including grants administration, statistical support. We have master's level and PhD analysts who we work with. I mentioned the Friday group, where we really help people get a free review, before you submit a grant. It's really helpful in getting funding and not having to go through rejection after rejection, although that is part of this world. It's really a great way to get a leg up and really understand, how you can improve your grants as best as possible, or practice your talks before you give them, that sort of thing. Some people have called it how to get an R01 group. And I will say from personal experience, it was invaluable for me. And I still do present my own ideas, and it's been very helpful in getting funding. And then I run a research consultation unit for global health through the DCR, but it's also affiliated with our center. And this flag here, or sorry, this map here shows, lots of different places where we work around the world. There are many stars here. There are also stars that you may put somewhere else. But I will say that our flagship programs are in East Africa. We also have folks working in South Dakota. So global health can also be domestic. And you don't have to work necessarily at one of these sites. We also have a lot of people working in South Africa, India, many places around the world. But these are just some that we already have established relationships with, and would be happy to help, expand into areas that may be of interest to you. So I think I went a little longer than I initially planned with my slides, but I'm happy to stay on for any questions. And you can see our website here where you can get more information about our mentors. Basically everything I covered today, you can find a lot of background on that on the website, including our application for the program. And you can see my email here, and also Lindsay Garrison, who's on the call today, is our program manager and can answer any questions around the logistics of the application process and what the fellowship can offer for you. So with that, I will stop. And happy to take any questions live. I'm just looking in the chat. So the first question is, IMG can participate, ECFMG certificate is required to apply. So these are questions about international medical graduates and the Educational Commission of Foreign Medical Education. So people who've gone to other places for training are absolutely eligible. We do have the requirement that is enforced by NIH about being a US citizen or having a green card, but training in other places is absolutely fine and often quite welcome. Any other questions?
I don't happen to see anyone else typing in the chat. Not sure if you want to give them a minute or if you're comfortable. Okay.
Yes, Alyssa.
Just a quick question. Do US nationals count in the US citizens and green cards?
I would have to look. Lindsay, have you come across that?
I can look this up and get back to you, Alyssa, if that's helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, I work with a group out of American Samoa, and I know we have some American Samoan students who are currently doing PhD programs, and they might be very good for this program. So
yeah, I would think yes, but I don't quote me on it. This is a new program, and so we're still learning some of the fine print, in terms of what's allowed from NIH. But I think it's definitely in the realm of possibility. So we'll follow up with that.
thanks. And do you have a call that's available that I could share?
Yeah, I think if you go to our website, let me put that back up again. Let's see, how do I get back? There we go. Can you see my screen? So if you go to our website, you can download, the basic package for the application, or feel free to email me or Lindsay, and we can just send it to you by email. And Kevin, I don't know if these slides are made available to people on the call or if they're on the website. That way you can just click the link.
I can make it available right after this lecture. I believe
Okay.
that they should already be, but if not, I will add them.
Okay, it's the same version I emailed earlier.
Yes. Okay. Then I will double check to make sure it's available on the course page. Exactly how we got here to the link.
Excellent.
I don't happen to see any more questions in the chat.
Hi.
Oh,
Sorry.
Yeah.
Really great presentation. Thank you so much.
Of course.
I'm not a postdoctoral student. I was really just hopping on for some information, and maybe this is completely irrelevant or could be taken offline, but I'm just really interested in Center for Global Health and if there are any programs or fellowships for predoctoral students. I just really am interested in global health research and would love to get involved, but this just makes me really excited for my future. So congrats on getting funded.
Thank you. It definitely was a team effort to get the fellowship funded, and I think it will open up a lot of opportunities. And we're hoping that it will be a catalyst for other programs, and including maybe some predoctoral opportunities in the future. But I think probably what's best is to just email me, Camilla, and we can set up a time to have a one-on-one discussion.
Great. Thank you so much.
Sure, of course. Excellent. Okay, Kevin, I think we can probably go ahead and stop recording.
Okay. Before we conclude, I just want to say thank you, Dr. Haberer, and I just want to remind everyone that tomorrow we also have another T32 Spotlight Series session. It is at, I believe, 12 to 1, and it's also in open courses. And that's really all I had to share. And thank you again so much for presenting today, Dr. Haberer.
My pleasure. Thanks, everyone.